Assalamu alaikum to some of you and peace out to the rest of you. Again, let me skip everything and just remind you that the message is more important than the messenger. That being said, look, to Sergeant Willie Pete, I'm not really aware. I'm still learning about this whole light skin universe thing. And I'm not one that supports us breaking away and forming a renegade community per se, unless the majority of black folks want us to do so, in which case we have to. As you said, majority rules. If that's not the case, and to my direct real life experience, it's not, then I can't support it. But I know that what I've come to understand is that usually some light-skinned women, i.e. Izzy, light-skinned motivation, and a dark-skinned man, a non-black man, do promote this idea. A few black men that don't create content that identify themselves as light-skinned were listening, and I guess they feel the same way, but they're not creating content saying it. So I'm just saying that to say that my direct real-life experience with really any light-skinned black person that wants us to form our own community is nil. It's not there. Now, you and I are not going to agree on one thing, and that is admit the existence of light-skinned black people without admixture. I believe in the existence of light-skinned black people with and without admixture, and I'm including what you call mixed race folks in that. With and without it. I have looked it up because I had to try to explain my own lack of melanin when I was younger, but I was told that the explanation was not any white blood. So I assumed that maybe the explanation was Native American blood. My parents could not confirm it until later on, when my aunt did the research. Later on, I found out. Later on, I actually found out that I had actual Caucasian blood, but apparently nobody has ever resembled those Caucasians. I have no relatives, blood or by marriage, that actually could pass as Caucasian. I don't have any. They can either pass as other or black. But what I do understand is that genes, although generally speaking, the genes for darker skin or more melanin are dominant, there's more than one gene for it. If they map out the human genome, it's somewhere between 8, I forgot the exact number, but it's something like between 8 to 19 genes responsible for a human being's skin color. Now, these genes, generally speaking, are dominant if they code for dark skin, but some of them are not. And then some of these genes can be in the off and on position, so they could be present but in an off position. Just like, for instance, all human beings have a gene to hibernate, just like bears do. We all have it, but in every human being, that gene is off. In bears, that gene is on. So that's why when winter comes, when fall comes, actually, we don't start getting drowsy and extra hungry. We're just not made like that. The gene's there, but it's off. There's been no human being who's inherited the gene in the on position, thankfully, because we can't hibernate. If anybody had it in the on position, they'd have to gain so much weight in the fall that they would die in the hibernation, or they just wouldn't hibernate anyway. So I'm just saying that to explain the genetic possibility, but I'm not here to give a lecture on DNA per se, and I'm not the expert on it. This is what I learned from experts. But I do want to say this. Even though I'm willing to listen to what a non-black man in light-skin motivation have to say, because I lived through a lot of it, most of us actually aren't trying to break away. Because we can't push our relatives off to the side like that, and most of us don't have relatives that were pushing us off to the side. So it's just not something we could do. As you said, you have family all over the spectrum. Yeah, well, that means we have family all over the spectrum too. We're not willing to form a community that our relatives are not welcome in because of their skin color. This is not something most of us are willing to do. However, I do want you to understand this. If you are worried about the propagation of light-skinned people as a species, keep this in mind. That's not where it's coming from. You see, number one, the first light-skinned people were not created by whites or by Arabs. Actually, the first light-skinned people were the ancestors of the whites and the Arabs. Actually, they were the ancestors of the Arabs. And then they became the ancestors of white people. DNA and geneticists analyzing bones have found this out. The Irish are descendants of actual Middle Easterners, believe it or not. It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, so they're, with their ginger reputation, they are the descendants of Middle Easterners. As a matter of fact, the Middle East went into the British Isles, and that's where the Irish came from. And Europeans as a whole descend from Middle Easterners, actually. Now, moving further on, there is something else at play, too. Light-skinned people can be, they can exist because of an admixture, but like I said, the first ones existed without an admixture. And then as some of them moved out of Africa, as various complexions of people, I'm sure, moved out of Africa and into what's now Yemen, people spread from there outside of Africa. And as they moved further away, more and more of them would have been born probably within 4 generations with lighter skin tones, and then lighter and lighter until they could get the vitamin D they needed from the sun that was available throughout the year. But light-skinned people are not propagating, and this is not going to happen. Maybe in Latin America they will until they can no longer be called black. Maybe that is true. That's possible. I've heard them talk about it, but then there are also a lot of women in Latin America that when they reach that level, or when they're born with that level of non-blackness or low levels of melanin that are considered acceptable and successful, guess what? They start wanting darker men again. We're not, at the end of the day, it comes down to this. Light-skinned women don't have us to turn to because they don't want us, like you said. They'll throw us under the bus. They may not hate us, but the only times they even want to be seen out in public with us are when we are related to them. They don't want to be seen out in public and thought to be with a light-skinned man. You got a lot of chocolate sisters that feel the same way. If the man is too light-skinned to the point that he's racially ambiguous, they don't want to be seen out in public with him. I've actually been out in public with a few times with some sisters that were in the middle. They were in the middle, and they started to get uneasy and embarrassed. That happened. And I just got used to thinking that I was an embarrassment to them, and this was even before someone sat me down and told me, Black, this is before 2001, when one of my colleagues told me, Black, you really should not have been trying to date black women in the first place. They're not going to treat you the same. I'm like, why? What do they hate about me? They don't have to hate you. It's about embarrassment and public image. Right now, it's the in thing to be out with a, tall, jet black, bald-headed, muscular man. Your build is okay, your normal height, your medium height, but that's not what cuts it. You would have to be taller, bald, and more muscular to compensate for the fact that you look like this with your color. And your hair is straight too. That's how she broke it down for me. So I understand. I came to realize that in actuality, we get thrown under the bus by a lot, really. Truth be told, you know who it is that does come after us a lot of times in Black America? Country and ghetto women. That's it. We can be, in many cases, that is it. If you are a light-skinned black man and you do not have a 6-figure salary and advanced degrees, you are going to be approached by the country and ghetto women, the ratchets. That's what wants you, and that's what will admit to it. Because they got plans to discard you too. Maybe to get your money. Because again, the only thing they can justify to their friends, which is really one of the most important things in a woman's assessment of a man, all they can justify to their friends is getting a so-called cute baby out of you, which they may still mistreat if he's not cute enough, and getting your money, your resources. Even if they think you're cute, even if they like you, they still at some point are going to have to justify to their friends, and they cannot justify being with a non-black looking man, or even a light-skinned black man like Michael Ealy, for that matter, for years and years, with everything else being equal. Other things have to compensate. And if he's got the money, well, then, they're going to come under pressure by their friends to divorce him to get that money, not stay with him. To divorce him because they could get more if they were being taken care of and the lifestyles being provided by the husband all this time. So we don't have the option. If we were to decide, okay, we're going to get what light-skinned women have light-skinned, that wouldn't even be an option. And most of us ain't trying to do that anyway. Even now, when I was in high school, I knew, Black, don't date anybody lighter skinned than you. You're already too pale. It's not that you're ugly. It's not that you're inferior. But if you have a son and he looks like you, he's going to go through what you go through. That's what's going to happen. You can't bring him around white folk because he ain't white. You can't put him in black environments because he ain't black enough. He ain't scary enough looking. So don't do it. Just don't do it. And that was it. And come to find out, most of them weren't interested anyway. They could be in the middle of the spectrum. And if they were interested, they would not admit to something like that. That was until I became violent. So had I chosen to do this, it would not have even been an option. And I didn't want to, and I didn't know anybody else that wanted to. It's in the hands of the women always, whatever their shade is. They've always been the ones that have the choice. We say we choose who we marry. We can agree, but they still have the choice even in that. They got all these options, plenty of them. They're only mad about the options that they don't have because those are so rare in the first place. That's really all it is. They kind of shoot down the options. They eliminate a lot of what is there as an option. But they still got more choices than we do, whatever the shade is. You're right. Light-skinned women will throw us under the bus. That is very true. What that means is that we're not the ones who are responsible for a so-called propagation of racially confusing populations passing themselves off as the rest of us. That's not something we men can take accountability for. It's not us. We didn't do it. That was something that was chosen by the women in both cases. For me to even be with any light-skinned woman, I had to leave the United States. I wasn't looking for her. I was introduced to her, but that's what that took. For me to be with a sister at all and be happy, I had to leave the United States. I didn't expect to find it, but I did. Actually, twice. But that's the thing. See, I had to leave the States to have any option at all, regardless of shade. That's what a lot of light-skinned brothers are going through. And truth be told, a lot of them are going to die unmarried and single and childless. And definitely not having children with a light-skinned woman. It's not up to us. We're not the problem, bro. A lot of light-skinned women they're not really the problem. It's really not the case. And most people that are jet black ain't the problem. Most people in the middle are not, but the minority coming from anywhere is the problem. I just don't think we should split up our majority because of a loud, ignorant-ass minority. That's all. I'm not saying anything that in this recording with hatred. I tell you what. If you want to come hard on anybody and say they need to get out the black community, I will accept you saying this about me personally, if it means that others who are ready, who choose to stay, can stay. I will accept being kicked out even. If you can successfully convince the black majority in the United States to kick out black heart, black mind, I will accept it if it means that the rest can stay so long as they choose to stay. I'll accept it. If that's where their loyalty lies with the rest of our community and they want to stay, then they should be able to. And I'll accept being kicked out. I'll accept the exile on that condition. If you can convince them, you can convince the majority to exile just me and not others unless they are proven to be disloyal. Fine and fair enough. I can take the exile if it's actually a decision you can convince the majority to follow. But I don't think everybody else can. Thanks for listening. And thank you for going to bat against those who said that we've never built anything.